at all. Because you see, let me tell you, that immunity is a facade. Because go to the hospitals, a lot of people are ill. People are constantly treating typhoid. People are constantly treating malaria. Some people have major resistance. So as much as we can laugh about this, it is a serious issue.
It is a serious issue. Let's go on another commercial break. Before we come back, we'll still be speaking with our guests and to delve deeper into the ways this affects us and how we as people, governments, and public and private individuals can fix the problem. If you do not know, we're talking about plastic waste and how to beat plastic pollution in the country. This is still Voices from the Minds.
Every Friday on JFM, energy transition and climate change mitigation in Nigeria takes center stage, explaining the role of ASM in energy transition and climate change mitigation in Nigeria, with their objective to advocate and campaign for a full implementation of the Nigeria Energy Transition Plan and other global policies and treaties. Join Emeka Umesi and our seasoned resource persons on the role of artisanal and small-scale miners in energy transition and climate change mitigation in Nigeria. Fridays 9 to 10 a.m. only on JE 101.9 FM. Powered by Ziva Community Initiative Advocates for a Sustainable Community with support from Africa Center for Energy Policy.
Voices from the Minds brought to you by Ziva Community Initiative. This morning, we're speaking to our guest HC Nengi on how to beat plastic pollution. It is such a problem that this year's World Environmental Day has been focused on beating plastic pollution. Well, we talked about the problems, which are multifaceted, but let's talk about the possible solutions. Because, like they say, what's the use of a problem if there are no solution? You've talked about government policies and laws. What kind of laws do you think, and mention the ones you mentioned before, we need to put in place? Because in Lagos, for example, from July 1st, the government has placed a law on certain plastic. They say to them, you can't produce more than enough this amount of one-use plastics. If you do that, you are going to go down from the law. What other things do you think we can do as a government to ensure that plastic pollution problem becomes a thing of the past?
Okay, so government in enforcing, yeah?
Yes.
Now, there's something called the PPP, which is the Polluters Pay Principle. Okay. Yeah? So it means that if you are producing and your plastic is harmful to the environment, yes, and it's proven, yes, there's a penalty for it. And these penalties are not just, maybe some fee. And when people start going to jail, maybe 1 year, I think people will sit up, clearly. But most importantly, it's about the source of these plastics. Because as much as we talk about companies, as individuals, because you have the markets, you have religious centers using all of these plastics, you have even political rallies.
Oh yes, a lot of that.
And there is no provision for systems to take off this waste. Neither is it recycled. And I really want to give kudos to the pickers. These environmental guys, they are the heroes. Because can you imagine what would happen, or how the state of Plateau or Nigeria would be if you didn't have these pickers going around? These people we call them Babambula.
Yes.
Yes? If you didn't have them going round to pick, can you just imagine the state? Because if people can leave their homes, their residence, with plastics, and they drive out of their homes, and they're seeing it, but they're not seeing it. And so you have these pickers go around, pick it up, and take it to companies for recycling, and they get paid. So, but then again, I think that the government has to find a way to bring them on board.
Okay.
That way, maybe set up cooperatives, and partner with them, so that way we're not just having just anybody, because you don't know these people.
True.
They don't have an address. But if the government can bring them on board and set up some cooperative, they have an identity. Because if you look at farming, for example, you have cluster farming.
Yes.
So if we have something like that, there's going to be checks and balances. Now, where are these wastes going to? They're going to mostly private individuals who are into local recycling because they have to survive. So these speakers, government has to find a way to work with them so that the issue of just throwing this waste or giving it out, when you send it to these recycling places, I'm not aware that the government has any recycling plan, but it would be nice
If they did.
that, yes, because if they did that, they're going to create employment.
Sure.
Large, like we're talking about people self-sufficient,
Yeah.
people would work, and so the pickers are the heroes of the environment.
I want to take you back a little to the PPP, which for me I think it's a contentious issue that I don't think we've spoken enough of as people. The polluter pay principle, like you mentioned, is whoever pollutes gets to pay. But we've seen several times, I think I read some years ago, when some companies, like it's almost normal when it comes to multinational companies, where they pick the law, where they find the way to, for want of a better word, find loopholes in the law. They don't pay as much as they should. And then even when they pay, they don't, it seems as though they think they are doing us a favor. Some have also questioned that maybe the PPP is not the best way to curb the issue. First, because of the loopholes in the law, because also the multinational companies and those who are involved, who are very much the reason for why we have these things, have found a way to beat it. Some have also suggested that we have a different way of dealing with it. Like you mentioned, maybe certain companies are not allowed to produce certain amounts of waste. Some have also said that maybe instead of these multinational companies who are very much involved in this production, maybe they're broken up into smaller companies to ensure that they don't have as much political and industrial power to fight with the systems. What do you think the problem is, especially the PPP, and how can we solve it?
No, but have you actually, when you say people have problem with the law and they're refusing to pay, do you have any evidence? Do you know what the law is? You cannot say you would not pay. That's the issue.
I'm saying they
so
are
maybe
not
they may
paying
be
as
faulting
much.
policies. You can't fault a law in the context, a law that has been gazetted. Because before a law is even gazetted, it's out there for public hearing. So the public is carried along. So that way you are aware, there's sensitization that look, if you commit, this is the penalty. So you may fault a policy, but for you to fault a law, government doesn't rush into forming laws. No. It's a process. So laws cannot be faulted, and that's why for some states they do have mobile courts. And so a lawyer will tell you, you need to pay, because this is the consequences. So no lawyer will tell its clients who has breached, do not pay a fee, and then if you don't pay, because there are fines, you pay, or then you do 3 years, either 3 months in jail or some community service. So I don't think we should mix it up, because if you faulted a law, maybe you read about it and then you were not part of it. But ordinarily, when laws are formulated, there is public hearing. It's not a one-day thing. Sometimes it can take months. So that when it is gazetted, no lawyer will say, oh, my client is not going to pay. So you may fault a policy, yes? Which also goes through the same process of, getting stakeholders involved. And so when laws are formulated, stakeholders are also involved, because it gets up to the assembly, whether it's a national assembly or a state assembly, and then it is passed into law, which is why people pay. Some of these companies will actually even pay for 2-3 years. They do pay.
Okay. So let's talk about the solutions again, like you mentioned. Education is a big part of environmental solutions. How much education are we getting in the schools, on our media platforms, and how much more should we and can we do?
I don't think we're getting enough. And I think it's best we actually start from when kids begin to speak. To actually incorporate environmental education as a study, as a course, so that these kids, if you recall, in my younger days, we were only told to pick and throw. Yes? Sweep the place, pick and dispose. But we were never told that you could recycle.
Yeah.
You were never told that, oh, plastic is bad. Now, if we can, in the early school life, begin to teach kids and also have competitions among schools, in waste segregation and waste recycling, it's really going to help. Because I'm really very worried. Because the generations that are coming, what they're inheriting, the kind of strained garbage that has been there for decades, because it's not their fault. So, but then they will be able to fix it if ministries of education say, look, environmental education, whether it's from nursery, primary, secondary, and tertiary, should be compulsory. It is very, very important. You have the social media with this whole Gen Z and all this whole tech period. Social media, I see some people actually doing that on their own. They capture areas that are polluted with plastic waste and they talk about it. But many people are not interested. But if you start incorporating that from an early age, then it will help. And then from the source, our residents, if we now begin to see how we can also, parents talk to our children and begin to separate this waste. You do not put plastic with food waste. You're supposed to separate them, So there has to be an aggressive enlightenment in this regard. And it is important that, it is taken very seriously, whether it's a private school or a public school, the environmental education should be a thing. And then when you now incorporate competitions, you will see that people will get excited, the students will get excited about it.
Finally, before starting calls on the show, let's talk the rule of tech. I think some years ago, say 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago, there was this woman, her name eludes me right now, she was in Lagos, she started this recycle, forgotten the name of the business, where you found plastic in your area, you gather them, you send a message, you waste yourself, send to them, and they come pick it up for you. Let's talk plastic. How important would tech be in solving our plastic pollution problems? And are there solutions like that already existed?
Yeah, that's a very great question. Plateau actually has waste, but not properly managed. And my solution will be that if the plastic waste is actually managed from source, which means from homes, yes, you have the compactors come pick them up, and then they take it to the dump site, where of course the state would already have its recycling plant, yes?
Yeah.
It becomes easier. When waste is taken from source, it's easier. And it's not actually even every day. It could be, no, twice a week.
Okay.
Yeah, because Nigerians generate waste. So you have the beans, as it's done every other part of the world, even in the FCT. You have your beans out there, the dino beans, and then they come in, they pick it, then they come. If they do that, today is Friday, then they come on Sunday. So twice a week. And then you're separating your waste. Okay? Yes. So now you that culture, unconsciously, in your home, you know that every Monday these guys are coming to pick the waste. And so when this waste is taken to the plant, it is now recycled and can be, like you talked about that lady, she produces packers, chairs, and all of that. That now also becomes a source of livelihood and a source of revenue generation for the state, because they can start producing their own branded beans, and people can actually come from other states to purchase.
Speaking of that solution you brought about, some months ago, I think it was last year, I was in a conversation with some environmental advocates here in Plateau State, and a few ideas were shared, right? Told them to share them with you. One of them was, instead of just letting people separate plastic waste and give them to all for them to compete, somebody suggested that what if we start doing incentivized plastic separation? So if you separate plastic waste for a week, when I come, I'll measure it, so only gets a certain amount of kilograms based on what I've gotten from you, and we both agree this is how much you've given, we're going to give you something. Now the problem, I think, with that is, many of the places that produce this waste don't have accessible roads. Many of the places that have this waste don't even know in the first place they should. Many of the places that produce this waste don't have bins to dispose the waste in. So you like you mentioned, people dump their waste in waterways, but they have no other options. More often than not, they are looking for where to dump their waste, and there's nowhere to dump their waste, so they do it the closest and easiest place to do. So in terms of that, what other things can the government do? First, do you think that idea is going to work? And if it will work, how soon do you think it can be implemented?
Honestly, that idea is actually bogus. To be honest, I'll tell you why. Because when you tell people bring your waste, can you just imagine an entire residence in Rayfield, people just carrying stuff? Some people might even go and start stealing other people's plastics. Yeah,
Okay.
because it's monetized now.
Yes.
You know, anything about money, Nigerians are excited. So the moment you monetize it, people will steal other people's plastics.
But the plastic will still be recycled.
The plastics, but then there's going to be fracas. So, but then it is important, those areas that are not reachable, because let's look at the people who really are not earning so much. We can't be doing that with the people who are in the GRAs and what's it called, the Rayfield and all that. But you can do that in communities, you know, because those guys, like I said, the pickers, they're already doing that and they're paying them. So government can now work with them through its agency, which is the PEPSA, and then I'm sure the Just Metropolitan Board as well. They can now work with them. So you zone it. That's what I was looking for. So you zone an area for that purpose, so that they too can benefit. I will agree with that person. But you cannot do that for the entire state. You need to zone an area that is largely populated, you know.
When you say zone, so I'm trying to get a picture here. So let's give an example of abattoir and let's say abattoir and Old Airport, for example, combined. When you zone it, what then happens afterwards?
No, you need to zone and then you test run. You see, in Nigeria, we don't test run things, and every other country does, because so that you can improve. So you don't just say something and then, oh, okay, we can. Well, start with a zone first and see how it works. And then if it's yielding results, then you now move to another zone. You don't want to do the entire state at once. That's why you have to start with the densely populated area, because they are the ones who even have more of these, especially the sachets, the plastic sachet packs. So zone it first and start with them. And then those incentives can be given to them. It also now keeps the environment clean. At the same time, so the lowest income earners, it now becomes a source of, even for people who really don't have any job at all, they take it upon themselves. Those are the pickers.
Yes.
You know. But my issue is, where is the waste going? Are you aware a lot of waste is leaving Plateau? Plastic waste. So it's being sent to Lagos, sent to other states.
That's worse.
People, yes.
Financially, we are losing.
Yes. So the onus now lies on the government to ensure that, whether it is through PPP, I'm aware that there's one already, there's that kind of arrangement of recycling, but I don't know if I don't want to be confirmed if the case, but I'm aware that they have that kind of partnership with a company already. So I'm sure by the time he kicks off, that will create employment.
Sure.
Yes?
Yeah.
And then those guys in the low income areas will now begin to, but I think that they should engage the pickers, and so you have control, especially because you're also looking at insecurity. You want to have a data of pickers.
Yes, so not just about anybody comes to the communities.
Yes.
The phone lines are opened: 09055666699 or 08121877777. We're speaking to HC Nengi and Nwuche this morning about beating plastic pollution. Let's see if we can pick one or two calls before the end of the show. I need to also apologize for not opening the phone lines earlier. My deepest and most sincere apologies there. Again, the phone lines are opened: 09055666699 or 08121877777. Let's hear your thoughts this morning. If you have any opinion at all you want to share with us, please call us and let's hear them. And if you have been involved or you know a picker, what are some of the issues you deal with even? Because I know that it's not exactly the easiest thing to do in the world. So let's talk plastic pollution and how to solve the problem. Final question for you, Mao, on the show this morning. For young people, how can we be involved? You made mention of content creators. Even though I think that in terms of environmental awareness, it doesn't sit front and center of our minds when we talk about the problems Nigerians deal with. But as young people, Gen Zs, millennials, what can we do to better improve our plastic pollution, not production, but the use of plastic, as well as its recycling process?
I think they can come together and form some eco club.
Okay, what's an eco club?
Yeah, like where you're going to be talking about biodegradable, the use of biodegradable products,
Okay.
and also now encouraging people on how to dispose of their plastic waste. It is very important. It's always good when you work together as a team and you talk about it, and also begin to go out, because you don't need government. When you have a club that begins to go out as a community and begins to educate people, especially in communities, on how to manage their plastics and the dangers, because I know. So, but then the man out there and the woman out there and the girl and the boy, do they know? So when you go out as a club and you begin to sensitize them and create more enlightenment, then they begin to understand both the dangers and how much it affects their health.
Right, so to every young person out there, go out there and start eco clubs so you can be the voices for change that we need. I would love to pick one call on the show, but we are very much out of time. I've got a number of questions, some of them still controversial, but again, like they say, time runs out on you when you're having fun. Final words, ma'am, to our listeners, final words to the government, final words to industries, final words to everybody listening to us right now. If you had to give them, I won't say a word of motivation, but a charge with regards to plastic waste, what would that be? Imagine you were Vusitem Kwayo and the words of a charge to them this morning.
I'd just like to remind everyone that we all survive on particles. And so if the environment is degraded and we have these issues, then clearly your health is at risk. So do the needful. For government, please bring these laws, enforce them, so that people can begin to abide. Just enforce them. Because once the enforcement begins to happen, naturally people will just begin to live right.
Yeah.
So let that happen. Let's enforce these laws. We do too much talk. And I'm not a stickler. I don't like to talk really. I just get the job done. So let's enforce. Just enforce.
Let's enforce the law. Thank you, Mom, for coming through this morning, and to all our listeners, thank you for listening. Thank you for always being a part of the conversation. This is the size of a package this morning, but do not worry. We'll be here again, same time next week, Friday, to give you informative and educative conversations. This has been Voices from the Minds, brought to you by Ziva Community Initiative. From me to you, stay out of trouble, spread love.